They said the economy was collapsing. Banks were dying. Panic spreading through every street in New York. Investors screamed. Newspapers declared the end of capitalism. But one man didn't move. J.P. Morgan sat in his library. No advisors, no noise, no fear. He poured a cup of coffee, opened his notebook, and locked the doors. Outside, men were begging the government to intervene. Inside, Morgan whispered, "No, they'll come to me." And they did. Every banker, every politician, every trembling voice, all of them, one by one, walked into his home like students entering a temple. He didn't threaten. He didn't plead. He just listened, waited, and decided. In 48 hours, a single man stabilized an entire nation without holding public office, without a title, without an army. That's power most people will never understand. Not the power to shout, but the power to stay calm when the world loses its mind. The power to bend reality not by force, but by presence. Because when you master yourself, you don't chase control, you become it. And that, brother, is where this story begins. Watch till the end, you'll see why some men command the storm, and others drown in it. A strong man knows the rules. The powerful one decides when they bend. That line sounds dangerous, doesn't it? Because it goes against everything we're taught as boys. We're raised to follow. Follow the system. Follow the expectations. Follow the invisible lines that tell us what's allowed, what's polite, what's safe. But here's the truth. Those lines were never drawn for your protection. They were drawn to keep you predictable. Every society, every empire, every company survives because most men obey without thinking. They don't question, they comply. They confuse obedience with honor. But think about it. When did obedience ever create greatness? Marcus Licinius Crassus, the richest man in ancient Rome, understood this. He watched senators bow to Caesar, generals kneel before power, and he realized something. Money didn't make him powerful. The law didn't make him safe. Control came from one thing: leverage. He didn't follow the rules of Rome, he financed them. That's the first illusion. You were told to play fair in a world where the powerful rewrite the rulebook while you busy memorizing it. You see it in workplaces every day. The man who follows every policy never gets promoted. The one who understands the politics, the timing, the optics, the unwritten conversations, he rises. Not because he's better, because he reads the room while others read the handbook. A strong man knows the rules, but the powerful one decides when they bend. Look at Hammurabi, one of the earliest kings to write laws in stone. People praise him as a man of justice. But he wasn't just fair, he was strategic. He knew that once you write the law, people stop questioning who wrote it. They obey the words, not the man. That's the real trick. Control perception, and obedience follows. That's how modern power works too. At work, in politics, even in relationships, the one who defines what's normal doesn't need to fight. He just needs others to believe he's right. And yet most men waste their lives chasing approval. They fear stepping out of line. They silence their instincts, bury their aggression, and call it maturity. But let's be honest. When did playing small ever protect you? When did being agreeable ever make you respected? A man who never tests the edge forgets he has one. The truth is, rules have always served those who are willing to bend them. That doesn't mean you break them recklessly. It means you understand why they exist and who benefits when you follow blindly. Take Richard the Lionheart. Courage like wildfire, loyalty like steel. He was the hero of the Crusades, but he spent more time fighting abroad than ruling his own kingdom. While he was out chasing honor, his enemies were rewriting alliances back home. That's what happens when strength isn't paired with strategy. He knew the fight, but he didn't know the field. And here's the second illusion. Thinking strength alone earns you freedom. It doesn't. Raw strength without awareness turns you into a soldier for someone else's cause. You'll find this everywhere. The man who works 10 hours a day to build another man's dream. The one who defends people who'd never defend him. The one who trades his silence for peace and calls it stability. That's not peace. That's slow death. Crassus, Hammurabi, Richard. Each of them learned this truth the hard way. Power is never given. It's taken by those who understand the game beneath the surface. But here's the good news. Every man can learn that game. You start by noticing the patterns. When someone praises your loyalty, ask yourself, what do they gain from it? When someone tells you to stay in your lane, ask who built the lanes. When someone says don't question authority, ask who benefits from your silence. The illusion of obedience is comfort, disguised as morality. It tells you that good things come to good men. But that's a bedtime story for the obedient. History belongs to those who walked into the storm and said, if no one is leading, I will. Vlad the Impaler understood that in his own brutal way. He ruled with fear, not love, and while his methods were dark, his insight was clear. People respect what they cannot control. They may hate you, but they'll remember you, and that memory becomes legacy. Now, I'm not saying you become ruthless, but every man must learn this balance, when to yield and when to stand like a wall, when to listen and when to command silence. The illusion of obedience ends the moment you stop seeking permission to be powerful. Because here's the thing, no one's coming to crown you. No mentor, no boss, no woman, no friend. You either take your place or you're forgotten. Every man who became legend, from the Iron Chancellor Bismarck to the quiet manipulator J.P. Morgan, understood this one truth. Respect doesn't come from fitting in. It comes from bending the world until it fits you. So the question is not whether you'll obey. It is whether you will dare to think for yourself when the world rewards those who done it. That's where manhood begins, not in compliance, but in consciousness. The world doesn't need more good men. It needs more awake ones. Power doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. It's not always the man at the head of the table who controls the room. It's the one whose silence makes everyone else uneasy. You've met that kind of man before, haven't you? He doesn't need to prove himself. He doesn't rush to speak. He listens, and when he does talk, every word feels heavy, measured, final. That's not charisma. That's perception, the art of controlling how others see you without ever asking them to. Most men never learn this art. They confuse loudness with confidence and dominance with leadership. But real power? It's invisible. It lives in energy, posture, timing, and presence. You can't fake it. You either have it or you don't, and if you don't, you can build it. John D. Rockefeller knew this better than anyone. He was soft-spoken, almost emotionless, but when he entered a room, entire markets shifted. Why? Because he mastered stillness. He never revealed his anger. He never reacted. He let others speak first, watched them reveal their hunger, their weakness, their tells. By the time they finished talking, he already knew how to own them politely, quietly, completely. That's the quiet power of perception. Most men spend years chasing validation while others shape how the world sees them in silence. They walk into rooms like they belong there because in their minds they already do. Confidence isn't what you say, it's what you decide not to explain. Otto von Bismarck understood this game too. He was called the Iron Chancellor not because he shouted orders, but because he measured his emotions. He could insult a man so gracefully that the man would thank him for it. That's emotional intelligence turned into political warfare. He unified a fractured empire using psychology, not just power. He knew that perception builds loyalty faster than logic ever could. And here's what most people miss. Perception isn't deception. It's discipline. It's knowing that not everything deserves a reaction, not every insult needs correction, and not every battle is worth fighting. In today's world, men burn out trying to prove they're strong. They post, they boast, they compete for attention, but the loudest man in the room rarely wins. He only exposes himself. A strong man knows what he's worth. A powerful one makes the world believe it too. Think about it. Who gets respected in a meeting? The one who talks endlessly, or the one who speaks once and ends the discussion? Who gets remembered in a crowd? The man begging for eyes, or the one who never asks for them? Power isn't in speech, it's in control. Control of breath, control of emotion, control of how others feel in your presence. That's what Shaka Zulu mastered on the battlefield. Before his armies fought, he would walk between them, eyes cold, movements slow. He didn't scream. He didn't rage. He radiated authority like a storm building in silence. His men followed him not out of fear, but out of gravity. That's masculine energy at its highest form, still, grounded, magnetic. You don't chase respect. You pull it towards you, Every man has this potential. It's not about looks, money, or rank. It's about alignment. When your thoughts, words, and actions move in one direction, people feel it even if they can't explain why. But here's where most fail. They leak power through reaction. They flinch when challenged. They defend when misunderstood. They justify when ignored. Every time you explain yourself to people who aren't listening, you bleed energy. Perception is built through restraint. If you can stay calm when your ego screams to be noticed, you've already won. Bismarck used to say, "Never destroy your bridges, only make people forget how to cross them." That's not manipulation. That's awareness. Because here's the truth, the world doesn't see you as you are. It sees you as you present yourself. And the way you carry your energy tells people how to treat you. If you act like a victim, they'll test you. If you act like a threat, they'll respect you. If you act like a king, they'll adjust their tone. You don't have to demand it. You embody it. Look at J.P. Morgan during financial panics. When others screamed, he stayed composed. He didn't have more money than everyone else. He had something rarer, certainty, and certainty is magnetic. The crowd always follows the man who doesn't flinch. You can practice this every day. When someone insults you, don't rush to defend. Just look at them, breathe, and let silence do the work. They'll feel the weight of their own insecurity collapse in the quiet. When someone challenges you, don't prove you're right. Ask questions that make them prove themselves. That's power redirecting energy instead of reacting to it. Men who understand perception can walk into any room from a board meeting to a battlefield and tilt the entire atmosphere in their favor. Because people don't follow strength alone. They follow stability. And stability comes from emotional control. Here's the paradox. The more you need to show power, the less of it you actually have. The ones who truly have it rarely need to demonstrate it. They move like water, soft, calm, but impossible to stop. Marcus Crassus had money. Richard had courage. Vlad had fear. But the ones who endured Rockefeller, Morgan, Bismarck mastered perception. They didn't conquer others. They made others willingly surrender. You can't buy that. You can only build it through silence, through patience, through an unshakable inner world. Because power isn't loud. It's presence. And when you have that, people stop questioning you. They start orbiting you. That's the quiet power of perception, the strength to move the world without ever raising your voice. Every man wants to be strong, but few ever ask strong for what. Because here's the truth no one tells you. Strength isn't free. Every ounce of it demands something in return. You pay with isolation. You pay with silence. You pay with misunderstanding. The world cheers for strong men, but only as long as their strength serves its comfort. The moment you stop playing the hero, you become the villain. Alexander the Great learned that. He conquered nations before most men grow a beard, but the higher he climbed, the lonelier it got. His friends turned into followers. His followers turned into shadows. No one told him the truth anymore because truth doesn't flow upward easily. He built an empire that stretched across continents, yet in his final days, he had no one he could trust enough to hold his sword. That's the hidden cost of being the strongest. Every man who walks this path faces it. The strong shoulder what the weak avoid: decisions, pressure, solitude. They become the pillar others lean on, and over time they forget what it feels like to lean on anyone themselves. But here's the thing. Strength without reflection turns to stone. You stop bending. You stop feeling. You stop connecting. You call it discipline, but it's really numbness wearing armor. Shaka Zulu knew this pain. He was born an outcast, illegitimate, mocked, unwanted. He built his power from rage, training his warriors to fight like a single living weapon. For years, he won every battle until grief broke him. When his mother died, he forced his entire kingdom into mourning, forbidding crops to be planted, lovers to marry, or children to be born. He had mastered war, but not himself. His strength became his cage. That is the paradox of masculine power. The same fire that builds empires can also burn you alive. You see it even now. The man who never asks for help because he thinks it makes him weak. The one who hides pain behind sarcasm, or pride, or work. He doesn't realize that the armor he built to survive is now suffocating him. Every strong man has that moment when he looks around and realizes no one truly knows him. People admire his discipline, his drive, his control, but not his truth. They love the mask, not the man. Strength becomes a performance, and performances always drain the actor first. Think of Vlad the Impaler. He was feared by thousands, unstoppable in battle, but he ruled through terror so absolute that even his allies wanted him gone. He mistook fear for respect, and fear never lasts. It consumes itself. That's what happens when strength becomes obsession. You stop fighting to protect, you fight to prove. And the moment you need to prove you're strong, you've already lost your power. Ego whispers that more control equals more safety. But the truth? The tighter you grip, the more you lose. We've all seen it in relationships, in careers, in life. The man who micromanages everything ends up exhausted. The one who tries to dominate everyone ends up isolated. And the one who can't surrender ends up shattered. Because strength without surrender isn't strength. It's fear. Even the greatest kings learned this too late. Crassus chased glory until he lost everything in a single foolish war. He thought wealth and ambition could make him immortal. Instead, he died humiliated, his name remembered as a warning, not a legacy. The real strength, the kind that lasts, isn't in control. It's in mastery, and mastery starts where ego ends. Seneca wrote letters to himself during his years serving under the mad Emperor Nero. He lived in a palace of chaos surrounded by luxury, yet always inches from death. He realized something profound. Power outside means nothing if you lose peace inside. So he trained himself in stillness. He practiced letting go of what he couldn't command: fear, vanity, the opinions of others. And in doing so, he became untouchable. Even Nero, with all his madness, couldn't truly break him. That's the hidden path behind strength, the transition from control to calm. Because the strongest men are not the ones who fight the most battles. They're the ones who stop fighting battles that don't deserve them. Look around. How many men are breaking themselves trying to be everything: provider, leader, protector, while no one ever asks what's protecting them? How many bury their emotions so deep they forget what joy even feels like? You can't numb pain without numbing passion, too. You can't kill weakness without also killing softness, creativity, connection. Real masculinity isn't about killing parts of yourself. It's about integrating them, knowing when to be fire and when to be water, when to command and when to simply be. That's the lesson every warrior must learn. The sword is only as strong as the hand that can also open. Power demands sacrifice, but it should never demand your soul. The world tells men to chase dominance. But what it really needs are men who understand balance, men who can fight when it's time, but also heal when it's over. Because if you don't know when to put the sword down, the battle never ends. It just moves inside you. And when that happens, when you become your own battlefield, no victory is ever enough. That's the hidden cost of strength. It builds kingdoms on the outside, but it can destroy the one within if you're not careful. So the question every man must ask himself is simple. Do I want to be seen as powerful, or do I want to be powerful? Because one feeds the ego, the other feeds the soul, and only one of them lasts. Every man reaches a point where the old ways stop working, where strength no longer feels like progress, where control feels more like a prison than protection. That's the moment a man either breaks or transforms. Because here's the thing. Life doesn't care how disciplined or talented you are if you are still waiting for someone to give you permission to be powerful. The world will always test you not to destroy you, but to reveal who you are without the mask. This is where transformation begins, when you stop reacting to reality and start redefining it. Alexander the Great shaped history because he refused to see borders as limits. Bismarck shaped nations because he refused to play politics the way others expected. And Rockefeller built an empire not because he was lucky, but because he understood timing, leverage, and the psychology of value. They didn't wait for the world to open doors. They built their own and made others walk through them. That's what bending reality looks like. It's not sorcery. It's awareness combined with audacity. When you understand human nature, fear, greed, pride, and hope, you can predict behavior. And when you can predict behavior, you can shape outcomes. That's how J.P. Morgan moved entire markets with a word. He didn't manipulate people. He understood them. He knew that panic spreads faster than truth, and calm is contagious when it comes from certainty. So while others shouted, he whispered and the world followed. That's not luck. That's masculine alignment, the point where emotion, logic, and instinct move as one. The man who bends reality is not a magician. He's a master of perception, patience, and pressure. He sees what others miss because he's not distracted by noise. Hammurabi did it by turning chaos into order. He didn't just rule Babylon, he organized it. He saw that a city with laws could be ruled from the shadows, long after the king himself was gone. So he carved the laws in stone not for justice but for immortality. People followed not because they loved him, but because they believed in his structure. He bent reality by redefining what was right. That's how true power works, not by forcing people, but by making them want to align with you. And every man can do this, in his own world, at work, in relationships, in the mirror. Because life will always hand you rules, but the moment you understand who wrote them, you realize you can write new ones. Most men don't fail because they're weak. They fail because they play someone else's game. They chase what they're told to chase. They measure success by standards designed to keep them compliant. They seek validation from people who never built anything themselves. But once you see the illusion, you can't unsee it. The truth is, the man who bends reality doesn't try to fit in. He studies the system, then uses it like a tool. He knows when to speak the language of the herd and when to vanish into his own silence. He plays dumb when it serves him and wise when it matters. He knows that control is not in fighting the storm, but in steering its direction. Think of Otto von Bismarck again. The man could turn enemies into allies with a single dinner conversation. He understood that people don't want truth. They want the version of truth that makes them feel powerful. So he gave it to them while quietly moving the pieces toward his vision. That's power, not domination. Direction. Because domination burns out. Direction endures. That's what separates kings from tyrants, leaders from controllers, alphas from amateurs. The man who bends reality doesn't fight people. He shapes energy. He turns insults into information. He turns setbacks into leverage. He turns silence into authority. He learns that not every battle deserves blood. Some only require patience. When the world tests him, he doesn't flinch. He listens. He studies. He adapts. And then when the moment comes, he moves once, decisively, and everything changes. Because bending reality is not about control, it's about understanding flow. Every strong man eventually learns this. The river never fights the rocks. It shapes them, quietly, over time. That's how the world bends. Rockefeller once said, "The secret of success is to do the common things uncommonly well." That's not about perfection. It's about precision. Doing what everyone does, but differently, more intentionally, more strategically, more patiently. It's the same in life. Anyone can chase money, status, validation. Few have the clarity to ask why. And when you know your why, you stop chasing approval and start building momentum. The man who bends reality doesn't seek motivation. He builds momentum through alignment, aligning his habits with his vision, his energy with his direction, his discipline with his purpose. He becomes unstoppable not because life gets easier, but because he stops wasting energy on distractions. He realizes something powerful. You don't need the world to believe in you. You just need to believe in yourself long enough for the world to notice. That's how transformation happens. One decision. One shift in identity. One refusal to keep living small. Because the moment you stop reacting, when you stop begging, explaining, proving, you become unpredictable. And unpredictability is the purest form of power. The man who bends reality doesn't walk around saying he's alpha. He just moves like he's already written the ending, and the world adjusts its script to follow his. That's when you realize something profound. You were never supposed to fit in. You were meant to redefine what fitting in even means. That's the beginning of mastery. Not mastering others, mastering yourself so completely that the outside world starts mirroring your inner certainty. And when that happens, life stops being random. It becomes responsive. You think, you move, you act, and reality starts aligning. That's not magic. That's what happens when a man stops living in reaction and starts living in creation. That's what makes him dangerous, and that's what makes him free. There's a point where strength turns into stillness, where ambition becomes calm, where hunger transforms into direction. That's the point where a man stops chasing power and starts radiating it, untouchable. Not because he is invincible, but because nothing outside him can shake what is inside him anymore. That's real mastery. Not control over the world, but command over your own mind. Because here's the truth, most men live as slaves to reaction. They call it passion, emotion, justice. But what it really is dependency. They depend on others' opinions for confidence. They depend on outcomes for happiness. They depend on chaos to feel alive. But the untouchable man needs nothing to validate who he is. He's rooted, grounded, centered. If the world praises him, he nods. If the world condemns him, he still nods. Because he knows something most never learn. Power isn't about what you can control. It's about what can no longer control you. That's when life becomes still. Not empty, but focused. When Bismarck retired from politics, he didn't fight for legacy. He had already written it through results. He no longer needed to win. He had already proven that victory isn't a single moment, it's a way of existing. That's the kind of quiet dominance real men are made of. When Alexander's conquests ended, his empire couldn't contain his spirit. He died young, but his name didn't. Why? Because he moved through the world with a conviction so strong it became myth. That's the paradox, the body fades, but certainty echoes. The untouchable man lives with that same presence. He may not rule kingdoms or command armies, but wherever he walks, the energy shifts. People sense something, that rare calm of someone who no longer fights ghosts. He has fought his wars inside and out. He has seen what fear can do, what ego can destroy, what ambition can cost. And through it all, he has learned one lesson. Control is an illusion, but composure is real. He doesn't chase status because status fades. He doesn't chase approval because it changes. He builds something eternal, character. That's what makes him magnetic. People may not understand him, but they can't ignore him. That's the aura of a man who's done his work emotionally, mentally, spiritually. His silence feels louder than other men's speeches. His gaze feels heavier than their threats. Because he doesn't just walk, he moves with meaning. That's untouchability when everything you do carries weight, because it comes from inner order, not outer chaos. Think about Rockefeller in his later years. He stopped chasing numbers. He built foundations. He turned fortune into philosophy. He realized that true legacy isn't what you gather. It's what remains when you no longer need to. That's the journey every man must take, from proving to understanding to becoming. In the beginning, you fight for recognition. Then, you fight for control. Then, one day, you realize you don't need to fight anymore. Because peace was never something to win. It was something to embody. That's when everything slows down. You don't rush decisions. You don't explain yourself to the doubtful. You don't get provoked by the petty. You simply act and the world reacts. That's power in its purest form. When Vlad ruled, he believed fear would make him immortal. It didn't. But when Seneca lived under Nero's madness, he found a power far greater: detachment. He could lose everything and still remain whole. And that's what made him truly powerful. Because you can't defeat a man who isn't afraid to lose. You can't break a man who doesn't need approval to feel complete. You can't manipulate a man who's already at peace with himself. That's the final stage of masculine mastery, when the world still tests you, but you no longer flinch. You don't waste time defending what you've already proven. You don't trade peace for pride. You don't chase shadows for validation. You just live deliberately, unapologetically, quietly powerful. The untouchable man knows the rules. He knows when to bend them. And now he knows when not to play at all. That's not arrogance. That's evolution. He walks into rooms with an energy that says, "I'm not here to impress you. I'm here to remind you what certainty feels like. And certainty, brother, is contagious." Because when one man becomes still, others around him start questioning their own chaos. When one man stands tall, others remember they were meant to. When one man refuses to be moved by fear, others start finding their courage. That's the hidden mission of every awakened man, not to rule the world, but to inspire other men to rise. Because the world doesn't need more noise. It needs more presence. It needs men who move with purpose, speak with precision, and live with conviction. Men who know that masculinity isn't about domination, it's about direction. Men who know that ego isn't the enemy, it's the fire that needs mastering. Men who know that brotherhood isn't competition, it's reflection. That's the code of the untouchable. To be strong but not rigid. Calm but not passive. Proud but not arrogant. Free but disciplined. You can't fake that. You build it through years of falling, fighting, and finding yourself again. And when you finally stand there, after all the storms, with nothing left to prove, you'll feel it. That deep, quiet pulse of power in your chest. That stillness in your breath. That voice inside that says, I've been forged. That's when you've arrived. Not as a king, not as a god, but as a man, complete, grounded, untouchable. The journey doesn't end there. It begins there. Because once you reach that place, you stop seeking power and start becoming it. When the panic ended, J.P. Morgan unlocked the doors of his library and walked out. No victory speech, no celebration, just silence. The world calmed down, and he disappeared back into that silence like nothing happened. That's the thing about real power. It doesn't need applause. It doesn't post proof. It just is. The storm always returns. Different form, different century, but it comes. And when it does, you'll face it alone. No mentors, no manuals, no one to tell you what to do. And in that moment, your breath, your focus, your stillness, that's your power. The man who panics loses everything. The man who pauses owns everything. Morgan wasn't superhuman. He just understood one timeless law. You can't control the world, only the space between stimulus and response. That space is where freedom lives. That space is where you become untouchable. So the next time life trembles around you, remember the man in the library, calm, certain, silent. While everyone else begged for rescue, he became the rescue. That's what this whole journey was about. Not dominance, not ego, mastery. Because when you master yourself truly, completely, the world bends. And that's when the story stops being his and becomes yours. Watch it again, not to hear my voice, but to remember your own.